A few moments later.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. But today I have a quick question before I start my topic. Have you ever said library instead of library? Or maybe drawing instead of drawing? Don't worry, you're not alone. These are called phonological processes. So, they are not mistakes, they are natural changes our moods make to speak more easily. So, what exactly are these processes and why do we use them? If you're curious, please watch this video till the end.
A few inches later.
Phonological processes are speech sound error patterns that children use to simplify adult speech. So for this example, instead of saying cup, they might say up because they're deleting off the beginning consonants of words. When a child is using a phonological process like this, we want to try to start by helping them hear the difference between what they're saying and what the target word is. So we might say, here's cup and here's up. And then we would say, okay, listen, point to cup, and have them point to the one that we say. These words are exactly the same, except that one doesn't have a beginning consonant. Once they can point to the right picture, then we have them practice saying the different words while including that sound that they were having trouble with. For more information on teaching phonological processes, go to speechandlanguagekids.com/phonology.
So, phonological processes are changes that happen to sounds in words when we speak. They often make pronunciation easier, especially in casual or fast speech. This happens not only in children, but also in adults and second language learners. So basically, these are patterns that help us speak more smoothly. Let's look at 10 common types of phonological processes with simple explanation and examples you probably use every day. Assimilation is when one sound changes to become more like neighboring sound. For example, instead of saying input, many people say input. The N becomes M to match the P sound. And for the other examples, good boy becomes good boy. So the D in good changes to B because the next sound is B. Both B and D are made with lips and are voiced. So the D becomes more like the B. Our mood changes the sound because it's easier to pronounce it that way. While assimilation makes sounds more similar, sometimes we do the opposite. We make sounds less similar, and that's called dissimilation.
A few inches later.
The pattern we're talking about today is assimilation. Assimilation is common to about age 3, and at that point we'd expect that it would no longer be used. So assimilation is where a child will change a sound in a word based upon another sound in the word. For example, if the word was cat, your child might end up saying tat. If the word was duck, the child might instead say dut. If you're noticing this and they're over the age of 3, it's time to talk to an SLP.
Dissimilation is when we make sounds more different to avoid repetition. For instance, some people say February instead of February. The second R is removed because it sounds too similar to the first. It's a way to make speaking feel more comfortable. Now, what if we add a sound to make something easier to say? That brings us to insertion.
A few inches later.
Some more useless R's. Caterpillar, surprise, governor, paraphernalia, berserk, This is a process called dissimilation that occurs in many languages. When there are two R's too close together, it's too awkward for our mouths to produce that sound. So we usually just get rid of one. For example, in February, that ru is very awkward, February. So we just drop it and say February.
Insertion is when we add an extra sound between other sounds. For example, athlete instead of athlete. The a sound is inserted in the middle. For the other example, film becomes film. An extra vowel is added to break hard consonant sounds. People often do this to make the word flow better in their speech. But we don't just add sounds. Sometimes we drop them too. So let's look at deletion.
A few inches later.
I'm absolutely livid that there's no P in that word. Nobody says hamster.
So a couple folks tagged me in this, and I love to be of service. Broadly speaking, this is a process called epenthesis. So epenthesis occurs whenever you insert a sound to increase what linguists call the ease of articulation. Moment to moment, speaking probably feels effortless, so you might not always realize that a lot of what you're doing with your mouth requires a lot of fast, really delicate precision. So humans have a lot of strategies for making all that effort easier on our mouths and tongues. Specifically, this kind of epenthesis is called bridging consonant clusters, and it occurs because your mouth is having trouble jumping from the sound to the st cluster. All consonants have what's called a place of articulation, and that just means the part of your mouth you use to make the sound. It's difficult to move quickly from your lips to the place on your palate where you pronounce the S and the T, so people insert a P to make it easier. Hence, hamster.
Deletion is when we omit a sound in a word, especially in fast speech. For example, camera often becomes camera. The A is dropped. And for the other example, family becomes family. So the L is dropped to make it easier and faster to say. It happens naturally to make the word quicker and easier to say. So now let's talk about the opposite of weakening, strengthening sounds. That's called fortification.
A few inches later.
When a child deletes off the beginning sounds of words, we call this initial consonant deletion. It's not a speech error that we often see in children. So when we do see a child who is leaving off those beginning consonants, we like to see them in speech therapy. Those are the children that we would like to go ahead and get evaluated and make sure that they're getting the support that they need. At home, we can help by exaggerating those beginning sounds and pointing to our mouth to help the child hear it, such as, listen, ball. That word has a B at the beginning. Listen, B, ball.
So, fortification is when a weak sound becomes stronger. For example, in careful speech, someone might pronounce the T in little clearly as T instead of a flap. Or when non-native speakers pronounce this with a strong T, like this. So T becomes D. It shows they are making the sound stronger, sometimes due to influence from their first language. But we don't always make sounds stronger. Sometimes we make them softer. That's where lenition comes in.
A few inches later.
Lenition is when sound becomes weaker or softer. For example, the T in butter often becomes a quick T sound in American English, so it sounds like butter. For the another example, carried becomes kite, carried. The T sound is softened between vowels, so it makes the speech smoother and faster. And now let's move on to voicing, a change involving vocal cord vibration.
A few inches later.
Nasal elongation. For some speakers of Kelantan Malay, the velar nasal consonant ng is lenited or deleted at the end of a word. To compensate the loss of this sound, the ending vowel is usually nasalized. For example, kucing, kucing, tulung, tulung, kering, kering.
Voicing is when a voiceless sound becomes voiced, or the other way around. For example, leaf versus leaves. The F in leaf becomes V in leaves because of the added Z sound. So your vocal cords start to vibrate. And for the other example, house becomes house, house. So S becomes Z to match the sound flow. Now let's focus on vowels. Have you ever noticed how some vowel sounds less clear in fast speech? That's vowel reduction.
A few inches later.
Vowel reduction is when we pronounce a vowel in a weaker or more natural way. For example, banana is usually pronounced banana, not banana. The first and the last vowels become the weak e. And for the other example, support becomes support, sport. The beginning syllable is reduced to e for easier flow. This helps us speak faster and more smoothly. On the other hand, sometimes we stretch a vowel to show feeling. That's lengthening.
A few inches later.
Lengthening means making a sound longer, often for emotion or emphasis. For example, this is so good. The vowel O is lengthened. And for the another example, yes, the long S shows excitement, so it adds feeling and personality to how we speak. And sometimes we do the opposite, we shorten words to speak faster. Let's talk about shortening.
A few inches later.
So this is the last type of phonological processes, shortening. Shortening is when we reduce the number of syllables or drop parts of words. For example, refrigerator becomes fridge, or mathematics becomes math, and examination becomes exam. So same meaning but simpler word. This makes speaking more casual and quicker in everyday conversation. So now that we've gone through all these types, so let's wrap it up. So, phonological processes are everywhere in daily speech, for simplifying words to showing emotion, whether we're speaking fast, talking casually, or just being natural. The sound changes help us communicate more smoothly. So next time you hear someone say "kana" instead of "going to," remember it's not wrong, it's just phonology at work. Thanks for watching. If this helped you, don't forget to like and share and keep listening to how people really speak. See you next time.